Okay, while we are waiting for the projector to come back on, just a little bit about AFRINIC. Basically, as Ernest has said, and as you've heard today, AFRINIC is where you get your number resources from. Without your number resources, the internet stops working. That's a fact. Every device that you are connected on has an IP address. You're sitting here, you're browsing the internet, it's got an IPv4 address, and in this particular case, you're IPv6 enabled as well. That means that if you can't get addresses anymore, the internet stops working. There is no more expansion, and everything kind of breaks. I think the projector is still booting. But basically, AFRINIC as an organization is a community-based organization. It's made up of your internal management, you've got your board of directors, who are elected by the community at each AGMM. Your members are the people who get resources from AFRINIC, of which there are about 1,250 of them. And anybody here who's an ISP, who has an autonomous system number, etc., who's getting that from AFRINIC, has a say in the organization. And the scary thing is that I went around and I was in South Africa giving a Southern African version of the presentation. And I spoke to 20 different AFRINIC members. And I said, do you know that you have a vote within AFRINIC? Only 2 of them even knew they had the right to participate and vote. Now that gets to be a pretty serious issue, and you'll see why in a minute. So I'm going to skip through some of the introduction slides, but basically the brief introduction, similar to what Ernest said. The governance structure, as I've said, there was a board that oversees the operation, they're an elected board. There is also the constitution of the company that can be modified by the members if there is a 75% vote. The members may also set policies that bind the board. Under clause 7.6 of the bylaws, they need a simple majority to do that. And then the policies for IP address allocation and the policies which govern whether or not people can get address space are done through the policy development process, which I'll speak about in a second. The board of directors is divided up: Eastern Africa, Southern Africa, Western Africa, Northern Africa, Central Africa, the Indian Ocean region, 2 region independent directors, and the CEO who sits on the board ex officio. Even though he is ex officio, I need to stress he does have a full vote as well. And then there were different types of membership. The membership, though, basically, you've got your resource members, those who get resources from AFRINIC, and you've got your non-resource holding members. They do not have a vote, but your resource members do. And then you've also got your registered members, who are the directors, who get a separate vote in their role as directors. So some membership by numbers. You can't really see this probably, but those are all the countries that AFRINIC allocates resources to. You'll see that South Africa has the vast majority of members. Nigeria comes next, then there's Kenya, you've got Ghana, you've got Egypt. And so the number of members in the different countries differ dependent on the number of ISPs. It's interesting to note that if you analyze this and then you analyze the penetration in markets, there is actually quite a close correlation. But let's talk for a second about the policy development process. So, in the policy development process, when AFRINIC allocates out addresses, you have to meet certain requirements. Those are set by the policies, the IP allocation policies that say that you need to provide this proof of infrastructure, you need to use this percentage of what you've got before you qualify for more, etc., etc., etc. This is set by consensus. And the participation doesn't require membership of AFRINIC, meaning that every person in this room has the ability to partake in that process. You have a voice. And that voice is then heard, and the policy is set by consensus. But I also want to highlight the fact that keep in mind what was said by members of the floor about consensus. It can be very, very difficult to achieve. I've seen policies sit before AFRINIC that have sat there for 5-6 years before they actually got ratified. Our soft landing policy would be one of those. And then policy that is ratified is binding on all members, whether or not they exercise their voice. So the effect of bad policy, because keep in mind, anybody can propose policy, and it can say anything. If a policy is ambiguous, it leads to subjective allocation of space, which means that if a policy says, these requirements are a little soft, leave it to the decision of someone, you could potentially find yourself in a situation that, depending on the host master your request goes to, depends on how they interpret it, and depends whether or not you get your space. You do not want subjective policy. You need the rules to be clear so that everybody knows what they qualify for and what they don't. The other thing is, a policy may be fine for others, but it may badly hurt somebody else. So you've got to be careful, you've got to find the balance. As an example, the soft landing policy, which is a policy that's in existence, says that once there is only one /8 left, members will only be able to get a /22 at a time. This is fine for a really small ISP. A really large ISP that's growing at a large rate, /22 worth of IP space is not going to go far. That's 512 IP addresses. That really does not cater for large-scale development. So it creates a problem. The other one is a policy that prohibits the use of space outside of the African region if it's taken in Africa. This is a policy that's currently before the floor, actually written by somebody who's in this room at the moment. It can do a lot of good in some ways to conserve the space for Africa, but if a company that is African in nature wants to expand off the continent, they can't get space anywhere else, and that policy could hurt. So, one sense the policy is good, one sense it's bad. It's always finding the balance. Now, what does it matter? We need the space to do business, and as African providers, there are 3 ways to get addresses. You can get it from your upstream, but if you do that, you're stuck to one upstream. You can't multi-home, there's no redundancy. That's the way the internet works. Unless you have independent space which is allocated to you, you cannot multi-home it. You can get it from AFRINIC, that's the other option at the moment, while they've still got, or you can get it from the secondary market. However, if you get it from the secondary market, it ain't going to be cheap. I'll talk about that in a second. And then the policies that dictate what space is qualified for are in your hands. So it's your choice. And considering that the companies need these to keep expanding, to keep silent is to put your destiny in someone else's hands. This is a call to say you've got to get involved in your own destiny. So the current state of affairs in AFRINIC, there are 1,250 members of AFRINIC. And AFRINIC's got an annual income of about $3.6 million from membership fees. However, this is where things get worrying. The expenditure at the end of 2014 was around $3.9 million. Do the math. That's not sustainable. The remainder of the money made up through sponsorship, sponsorship, various other factors, but basically, without the sponsorship, we'd be in deficit. They also have almost no cash reserve, and it can be interpreted that AFRINIC right now is running on the wire. That is just hard fact. And sorry, that should say East African participation in AFRINIC. I took this slide out of another presentation, but basically there were 215 East African members, 16% of the membership base. East Africa contributes 17.5% of AFRINIC membership fees, or around $629,000 a year annually as of the time that I drew this data, which was in late August. Average of about $3,000 annually per member. East Africa also holds about 8.6% of the total space allocated. So there is a decent percentage of space and money being put in by this community. You can see here who puts in the money, all the different membership categories at the top, because dependent on how you get space, whether or not you've got a /16 and you're an ISP, or you've got a /24 and an end user, depends on your membership category. So that just breaks down who's actually putting in the money, and then who's putting it in terms of by country, who's putting in the money. So you'll see South Africa at the moment is putting in the largest chunk of the money by country, but East Africa as a region, as I said, is contributing around 16 to 17% of the money at the moment. So, does East Africa actually participate, considering they're putting in the money and it is having drastic effect? At the moment, less than 10% of the East Africa members ever get involved. I've analysed the mailing lists on this, which means that of 215 members, we've got less than 20 people that are actually having their voices heard. And that's a choice. It's a choice to put your destiny in someone else's hands. It's a choice to get involved or not. You're contributing financially, but where is your voice? In the board elections, as a whole in AFRINIC, we have a board election and a governance structure election process. And the last elections, we had around 120 votes of 1,250 members. Guys, you appoint the wrong board, they can do anything. This becomes a very dangerous situation if you are not participating. Back to the state of affairs. The rest of the world is running out, or has run out. In the case of Aaron, I know that Ernest gave some figures. Well, the latest figures I checked just before I stood here that are actually available for allocation is around 10,000 IP addresses for the entire North American region. They have no space. Currently, the AFRINIC policies allow foreigners outside to come and take African space and use it off-continent. That's a fact. You've got to jump through some hoops, register some shell companies, etc., etc., but there are ways to do it, and we've seen it happen. In the Seychelles at the moment, and in the Indian Ocean region, they hold as much space on a bunch of islands as the whole of East Africa. I can tell you now that there is no ways on planet Earth that that space is actually being used in Africa, because there are more IPs allocated there than the population. It's being used off-continent because the policies allow it. Which means that as the rest of the world runs out of space, we could find them taking our space, because we're not standing up and getting involved in policy and passing the policies to stop it. And if we don't change the policies, the space will disappear long before we're ready for V6. And changing policy requires consensus. That means numbers. That means you. Because if we can't get the numbers on the floor and on the mailing lists to get that consensus to change the policies to sane policies that stop the pillaging of African space, you will find that your space disappears. And that's going to hurt financially. And at the moment, we're letting the rest of the continent, particular regions, control our destiny. What is it that East Africa wants from their policies? Well, say so. Put the policies forward, propose them, and then fight for them, because otherwise if you don't fight for what you want, it's not going to happen. What about the current financial situation? The costs are outstripping the revenue if you remove the sponsorship components. You need a strong board with financial savvy and good corporate sense, else AFRINIC is in deep trouble. At the moment, the board is elected at AFRINIC meetings that, in my view, and this is a personal opinion, are largely frequented by technical people. Guess what? Technical people don't run companies. Business people run companies. That means that unless we have the people in the room and we have top-level management voting and involved, you will end up, time and time again, with the company being run by technical people that probably don't know what EBITDA is, that don't know how to read a P&L. Yes, you've got the company management, but you still need a board that is strong and financially savvy. That requires, when you vote, knowing your candidates. And we need that strong board. Furthermore, without more revenue and a reduction in cost, the organization isn't sustainable. That means there could be price hikes in the future, or we're going to have to cut costs. But one way or another, AFRINIC has to survive. Because what if AFRINIC failed? First of all, it gets far more expensive. It's as much as $800,000 per /16 on the secondary market at the moment, and the secondary market is finite. As the space diminishes, the prices are going up. You're already seeing it. 2 years ago, space on the secondary market was running at about $8. I've seen it going for as much as 14 now. Secondly, because AFRINIC does your reverse DNS would stop working. That means no mail, because mail doesn't work without reverse DNS. Your RPKI, another service that AFRINIC offers, would disappear. Your root registry would become a problem because there is policy proposals in there which would remove the root objects for Africa out of the root registry, and if that happened, your routing would stop working and you'd be offline. So we need the African root registry. We cannot afford for this organization to go wrong. What about the other risks? At the moment, the current bylaws, which I referred to earlier that can be changed, at the moment state that 5% of the membership base, that's 70 members, companies working together, can force a special general meeting, and the quorum for that meeting is 10 members. Scheduled at the right time and the right place and done right, you're not going to get any attendance at that meeting. And at that point, 75% of the members voting at that meeting or online could rewrite the bylaws and give themselves total control. That's a very scary thing when you've got 8 people, once they've got the signatures to force the SGM, that could take over the organization. That requires a bylaw change. That requires your votes, your participation, because we need the numbers. AFRINIC by the numbers, as you can see there, East Africa, which is highlighted there, they currently hold about 6.5 million IPs. That has a secondary market value, just by the way, of $70 million, roughly. That's what your IP space is worth. You really want to participate if you're sitting on a $70 million resource. The next 2 slides are who pays their bills. Because one of the problems in AFRINIC is getting people to pay their bills. So I took a look at this and I analyzed it by region. East Africa, you're doing quite well. 78% of the members are in good standing. Could be better, but it's reasonable. I also did it by country demographic, language demographic, just to have a look and see. At the top of that is the Portuguese. They love to pay their bills, but they have very few members, so getting that percentage up seems to be easier. Then you've got the English-speaking countries at 80.10%. You've got the Arabic-speaking countries of 76.25%, and the French-speaking countries, for whatever reason, are only sitting at 63% of their members in good standing. Considering the financial state of AFRINIC, guys, if you're getting resources, it's going to be a lot cheaper to pay your bills than let AFRINIC go bust and have to go to the secondary market and be paying $800,000 when you need IPs. Please, pay your bills. Some further figures, there are 40 million addresses still available in the AFRINIC pool. That was as of the 2nd of September, I believe. The secondary market value of that current pool is estimated at somewhere between $320 and $480 million. It's a lot of money. Why do I bring that up? Because if you want to know what sort of interests are eyeing AFRINIC that we need to be wary of, that we can only combat through participation, your answer is found in that amount of money. There are stories about people who've been taking space out of AFRINIC and acting as IP brokers. And I've seen the types of numbers that it's estimated these people are making. Believe me, every person in this room could retire off that kind of money. And it's going to hurt the market if we don't get involved. How to get involved? On the website, the policies are there. Look at them, understand them, read them. It's important. Then get on the policy development list and participate. If you feel the desire or need for new policy to change it, propose something. There's no harm in proposing policy. If it doesn't pass, it doesn't pass. But fight for it. Voice your support for the policies that are proposed or your dissent, but be heard. Use your voice. You don't have to be a member of AFRINIC. And in fact, I'll make you guys an offer. If somebody here gives me their email address, I will subscribe you to the AFRINIC policy mailing list myself, and all you'll have to do is click on the confirm link. Just get involved. I'll even make it that easy for you. If it's possible, have meetings and representatives at the meetings. Be in Congo coming up. Be at the following meeting after that. Be there. Get involved. And if you can't be there physically because, well, that can be expensive, attend it online. The meetings are streamed. The participation mechanisms are there. And if you don't feel you understand something, find someone who does and twin with them and let them help you. And I'm going to point out some people here. Douglas, he lives here in Uganda. He can help you understand the policies. Sorry, Douglas, I'm picking on you. He's been involved for years. Ernest has been with AFRINIC forever. He can help you understand the policies. Myself, I've got business cards, lots of them. Contact me. Work with people who've been here to understand the stuff, but get involved. With the governance, when the meeting notifications go out if you're AFRINIC members, read the governance papers. Read the proposed resolutions. I had someone come in resolutions that were proposed recently in Tunisia and said it's not fair to bring these resolutions to the floor because no one's had a chance to discuss them. The bizarre thing is the resolutions had been on the mailing list, publicly available, sent to every member, including the member who said that, for 3 weeks, and there'd not been a single comment. So read the resolutions, understand the governance, get to know your candidates before election. What are their biographies like? What are their track records? Can they better serve this organization? Don't let it become a situation where people are simply voting for friends. Look at the track records. And if there is a vote, and you remember...
Andrew, we have 3 minutes.
Yeah, almost done. If there is a vote, and you remember, use your vote. Don't throw it away. How to vote? Be at the AGM or vote electronically. Your options are online. And if you can't be there, give a proxy. That's also an option. Hand the proxy to someone who will be there that you trust. Whichever way you choose to without AFRINIC, space gets far more difficult to get and it's costly. East Africans have an option. You exercise your rights as members and you ensure a sustainable, well-run organization, or you hand control to the rest of the continent or to special interest groups or people who are being involved and you accept whatever happens. You're not powerless to make a difference, but you're choosing not to by not being involved. That's the message here. So on final thoughts, this is also not about East Africa versus Africa, and every time I give this presentation in a different region I say that. It's about the destiny of the African ISP industry, because without AFRINIC, the industry falls. And there are many across this continent who fought for better governance, more transparent financials, greater involvement. But due to lack of support, we've been running a losing battle. That has to be reversed, and that can only come by your involvement. So remember, your money, your organization, your time to choose your destiny. Thanks very much. And I could take some quick questions.
Andrew, I'm suggesting we're going to have a networking event outside the terrace, and they'll come over to you and ask questions. Thank you so much for the presentation. If you look at our program, we've shifted the rest of this session to start tomorrow morning at 8:30. So I urge everyone to come back tomorrow, and also tap your colleagues who are able to make it today, able to come tomorrow. One from the organizers here, they thank everyone for their time. It was a public holiday, and we thank everyone for they made the time to come and sit and go through today. It shows you're active and you're interested in what we're discussing today. Please do the same tomorrow as we wind up. And the last piece of good news today is that we have a cocktail where we're going to network and share more about what we discussed today, get to know about each other and what we do. The cocktail is right where we had the lunch. There's a terrace right through that restaurant, and everything is ready and set for you, so let's all go and meet down at the networking event. Don't forget to come back tomorrow. Thank you so much for your time. The cocktail is right now.
Oh no, what I want. Good stuff.
Thank you. You've done well.
So just